it's your job to consider whether you want to actually have these amendments made to the code, the land development code. That is done by the ordinance. The issues that we're addressing tonight have to do with 6 different topic areas. I'm going to go through the topics or the issues here by chapter so that you all have an understanding of what each chapter and set of recommendations are there. We'll go through this. So again, they're primarily administrative issues. First chapter, 17.01, under our general provisions in land development code. This has to do with annexation and zoning. Our current code, the way it is written, is in conflict with Kansas Supreme Court rulings and findings, in that it indicates that at the time of annexation, the property would get an equivalent zoning district assigned to it. So it would take over the previous jurisdiction's zoning, and a new city zoning category would be assigned to that. The Kansas Supreme Court rulings have been that is not how it should be handled. It needs to be handled in a manner that the county zoning stays in place until there's a petition or an initiation of the rezoning through the typical rezoning process. So the language changes here are to address that, to bring us in line with those court findings, that the rezoning of annexed land and the nonconformities that may result from such annexation related to the rezoning activities can be handled in the appropriate manner. So that's what we're doing in chapter 1 with those language changes. In chapter 17.02, this is our definitions section. We're really clarifying a number of definitions. You can see I've broken those out in the presentation between existing definitions and some new definitions. The existing definitions are primarily the clarification of wording in the definition that is already there. So we're not changing definitions per se. We're just getting clearer direction in the definition, so when we're talking to developers, we have a good understanding of what it is we mean when we're describing a block or a landscape area or a parking block. The new definitions are items that have come up in a number of ways. Small format homes, I just want to bring that up. That definition is a new one, and that's because we're seeing things like tiny houses and different types of housing that's coming to the table. So you can't just classify that as a mobile home or a manufactured home. So we want to make sure we're addressing those items. Again, the other ones are primarily administrative in nature. We've had questions before about what do we mean when you say something needs to be ADA ready. So we've clarified that and put some more language to it. Chapter 17.03 is our application and procedures area. The first bullet point there under conditional use permits is part of kind of 2 issues that are being addressed in regard to mobile homes and manufactured home parks. And one of the things that we found is in September, we had a case come before us in which we were looking at the lakes of Conestoga. Some of you may remember that. You would have seen that in October. And one of the problems was in the conditional use permit language, it wasn't clear as to how long those permits could be offered to the applicant, and there was also concern about clarifying when they expired and how you could extend those. So we did change that, where the length of time is now a flexible length of time determined by recommendation from the Planning Commission, and then certainly you would have that approval scenario. What's important about that, if you can think about this, we have some uses that require a significant amount of development investment. It's very hard to go ahead and get that investment if you're going to have a conditional use permit that's limited to a 2-year period. There's not very many financiers that are going to go out there and say, hey, we're willing to loan on this improvement, but it's going to be a 10-year or 15-year or 20-year loan, but you only have this approved for 2 years. So it was important to extend that time frame. The administrative adjustment side of this, already within the code itself, there's discretion granted to the planning director and planning commission. Whoops. I'm sorry. And we're done for tonight. Get back there.
My apologies.
Let's see what the. You giving it back to me, Sharon?
Yes.
Yeah, that's when they give the police chief
here.
now.
Oh, okay.
2 drink minimum, Jim.
Yeah, I got it. We're where we were. Administrative adjustments. Again, the director of the Planning Commission already had some discretion regarding some adjustments. What's important about this was we wanted to clarify what the role of the director is and what the role of the Planning Commission is. You really have a 3-tier process that's really built into the code already. It's nice to see where we have design review, which goes to the planning commission. And then ultimately, the third step is when we go to development plan reviews, where we have preliminary and final steps, which come to you. Ultimately, under that development plan review process, we have wide open discretion what you approve. If you want to make some deviations from the code, you're allowed to do that. You have ultimate discretion there. Under the other two processes, where it's limited to my decision, we went ahead and we clarified that I'm only involved in that discretion at the administrative site plan level, and the planning commission is given this discretion at the design review level. That way, when we're talking to people, they know who they're coming to and what we're allowed to do. The other thing we did is we did expand that discretion slightly. We went from a 5% level to a 10% level of director's discretion, which we don't know if that's going to be effective or not at this point. We're going to watch what happens with that. But if you can think about, in my sense, when we're looking at varying a setback, if I have a 5-foot setback, 10% really isn't that much. It's a half a foot. And sometimes that's a lot to do with the site context. We want to be able to make adjustments that fit into the context without them having to go through the full planning process. On the planning commission side, we expanded that discretion to 20%. So we're 10% for staff, 20% for the planning commission, and then ultimately, if they want to do something beyond that, they have to go through the development review process and see that. So that's where we're at with those items. Chapter 17.05 is our zoning districts and use standards. I mentioned the issue about conditional uses in regard to the manufactured or mobile home communities. Interesting finding here was, while we have a specified district, the RMP district, which is a planned district which has design standards specifically for the development of mobile home parks or manufactured housing parks, we were requiring a conditional use on top of that. So they have to go through the plan development process and then get a conditional use as well when they were going to a zoning district that was specifically designed for that use. So what we're clearing up there is we're removing that from a conditional use to a permitted use. They would still have to go through the plan review process, but they would not be required to have the additional conditional use as well. So that's important to note. And then the last item has to do with temporary offices for construction and development sites. Under the regulations currently, this is viewed as a temporary use. It would be allowed on commercial sites or industrial sites in those zoning categories as it stands today. But what we're finding is with some of the residential development, there's a desire to have that temporary office for sales or pre-sales, if you will, as well as initial construction purposes. What we're doing with the code at this point in time is we're making it so that that temporary office could be placed in a residential district under certain conditions, but it would be taken offline at the time the model home is completed. So they would have to get a permit for a model home. They could have the temporary office set up in that district for that development until the model home is complete and ready to be occupied for sales purposes. A lot of folks will use the garage for storage of materials at that time. So that's what we're doing in that chapter. There we go. As I said before, the Planning Commission has looked at this. It's held a public hearing. We did not receive any comments regarding it at the public hearing, and they recommended approval of the proposed amendments. And your job tonight is to consider the adoption of ordinance 2695. And with that, I stand ready for any questions.
Thank you. Just kind of stay there. I'm going to ask for public comment on new business, or I'm sorry, committee recommendation item number 1. Anyone wishes to come forward? All right, questions for Mr. Knopick. I'll start on my right, your left, with Councilwoman Roberts.
I have none.
None. Councilman Graborczyk?
I do. Thank you, Mayor. Dave and team, thank you for putting this together, and I agree that your predecessors did a lot of work on this, and it was a long time coming. I just have 2 questions, one more of a clarification. On the street trees under 17.02.10, there was quite a bit of conversation, if I'm not mistaken, about that. The dais has changed since then, but nonetheless, I just wanted to make sure I understood the verbiage here. So a tree could go either between the curb and the sidewalk or on the opposite side of the sidewalk and parallel to the curb, but not between that space.
That is correct. So it can go between curb and sidewalk or on the other side. And one of the issues here was that we actually had been talking about where it only included the area between the curb and the sidewalk. There's actually a graphic in the land development code that shows the strip on the other side of the sidewalk. So this gives us a little more flexibility in regard to street trees, and that's why we felt it was important to have that definition in there. We will probably look at street trees closer in further amendments and what that really means and how that all comes together. But for now, we wanted to make sure that people understood we had that option.
So if I was building a house in a new subdivision, would my house tree count as that tree that we just spoke of in those two different locations?
Not at this point.
Okay.
So there is a requirement for what we call front yard tree or a yard tree.
Mhm.
So this would be in addition. So the street tree is in addition to the yard tree still under this regulation.
And thank you, David. 17.0308, are we doing any sort of pre-site plan meetings with the developer?
Yeah, I'm actually encouraging two. One is specified in our code. It's a pre-application meeting. That is a requirement. They're supposed to come in with their stuff pre-application so we can look at it, make comments on it, and then they can make their formal application with some adjustments. What I'm incorporating now, which is not by code, but we've gotten good reception to this, is I've been encouraging developers to come in what I'm calling a discovery stage. The cost for even bringing something to concept level for pre-application is quite costly. So one of the things that I like to do with these folks is have them come in at the discovery stage, even if it's a napkin drawing. We take a look at the site with them, we bring up any red flags we're seeing very early in the process, get as much information in their hands and in their professional team's hands prior to them putting pen to paper. Once that pen hits that paper, it's already racking up costs. So our intent is to actually have two meetings, that discovery meeting and then that pre-app meeting before a formal application is made. What's important about that for us at the end of the day is once you enter that application stage, we've got about a 70-day window plus or minus to get the application from that first day to you for consideration and hopefully approval. What we don't want to be doing is bringing partial applications forward to you because we're waiting for more information. And we also, through the review process, only have time for about one iteration, maybe if we're lucky, two iterations if there's an issue with the plans. But that's also very expensive because at that time, all the investments have been made on stormwater studies, transportation studies, and then we're going back well into that cost and saying, oh, by the way, you need to adjust this, you need to change this, and then it causes a lot more cost for the developer.
Yeah, and well said, David. I was made aware of that and verified it just through some phone calls with developers that I know in the area, and they were very positive, and at the end of the day, it came down to dollars. So they agree with what you just said without recanting everything you said, but I think that's a good move. I think it creates a good partnership, and we were able to work through some of the kind of nuts and bolts items that not a lot of cost to the developer, which keeps them on the hook and keeps them developing our community. So thank you for doing that. That's all I had, Mayor.
Thank you, thank you. Council President?
Oh yeah, just want to say thanks for doing this, and I think these documents, you put pen to paper and write this all out, and then things come up, and you have to be fluid with it and make changes. So how often do you think, is this something once a year? We just kind of
Routinely, what I hope we get into is a rhythm of about once a year. I anticipate it may be a little more frequent. We want to be as responsive as possible as issues come up. Especially in this case, we had two of them that made sense to us right away, and there was no reason for us to hold those up. And that had to do with the temporary construction offices and in the mobile home park with that conditional use. There's just times when those kinds of things, it's blatantly obvious and obviously need to be dealt with. On some others, we're going to have some study sessions with the planning commission in advance. We hope we would have some public comment in the public hearing as we delve into some of the other issues that may be out there. But initially, these help clean up some of the administrative side of this. It also, as Councilman Gorchak was mentioning, by us doing the discovery meeting, that we're working through some of the other items that are in the code today. So
yeah, I like that as well. That's great. Thank you.
No specific questions, but I am glad to see that some of the things that have come up in the last few years are being addressed, so appreciate it.
Councilwoman Eden?
Same. Is this working yet? Same. Thank you for doing this. I had one question, and I could be way off base on this. So I remember we, on the planning commission, and I say we because I was there when it happened, issued a conditional use permit very recently to the mobile home park. So with this change, will they automatically get that thing, or do they need to come back to make sure that they are properly taken care of since they've already been issued the conditional use permit?
What'll happen here is they've been approved for everything, so the conditional use permit stays in effect, obviously. But once this the set of amendments, if you adopt it by ordinance, gets published, that's the official change. What they'll be held to is the standard then at that point, so they will not have to renew the conditional use permit.
Okay. Awesome. I just wanted to make sure that was taken care of for them.
All right. Thanks. I had a couple of questions really quickly, Dave. You were talking about small format homes as a definition, but within the actual zoning classifications, it talks about manufactured mobile micro home community. What's the reason for the discrepancy? I know this is getting kind of in the weeds, but.
Right now, what I've got is I've drafted some changes to that section of the code that will change actually probably the naming of that district completely, so it's not manufactured mobile home, micro home community district, but it'll be the residential small format home district. So we'll work through that. That's gonna take some discussion with the planning commission. I wanted to at least set up the definitions and things like that at this stage. But we will be bringing that forward at some point here. It's going to change some of the regulations within the district itself too, to give more flexibility to the size of the houses that are considered as well as the size of the lots. We do have a gap with smaller lots that we currently in our other districts do not fill. So these would be homes that are generally under 1,500 square feet on lots that are proportioned for the size of the home. So that's great.
Are we talking about maybe having some upward flexibility when it comes to like coverage on the lot and those kind of things?
Yes.
So instead of sticking with a hard 30,
Yes.
we're talking about maybe 50 or more percent?
Yes. And that's an important point, especially as we get into these smaller formats. It's going to be important to allow that flexibility. There is some housing development that's out there. I happen to live in some where even the lot size is only about 5 feet around the home, and when you start thinking about that, you can't meet some of our setbacks. It's not just coverage requirements. There's a whole series of different things. Those will typically come through your development plan review process, though, and you have the ability to deviate from those. That's why I'm not as worried about those standards at this point in time. They're going to come along with more amendments, but because we have that ability to deviate through the plan process, they'll come at a later date.
Okay, so that's the other question I had was about the administrative adjustments. So we went through the loosening of those adjustment metrics. My gosh, we need that. It would have saved us a lot of time on a lot of other projects. We would have had this sooner, but now we're going to get it, which is great. But is that just for planned projects, or unplanned and planned? And within the planned developments, is there going to be a different standard?
Yeah. So what happens with the planned developments, I'm going to separate those for a second. So even in some of our residential categories, we have development plans. So like tall grass was a development plan that you all would have seen. There is essentially, you have 100% discretion. There are things that you can literally deviate from and not enforce in that development plan. Now it has to meet what's called an equal to or better standard. And that's what the planning commission tries to assess. When our applicants make that request or they're looking to deviate from something, what we begin looking at is the overall design of the whole project. And there may be reasons that you're deviating from one standard, but in return you're getting something in the design or something in the actual development itself that's equal to or better than what that standard was. And I think the important part for people to understand is when somebody comes into us and there's no development plan required, or there's no site plan, or there's no administrative site plan necessary, those minimum standards stay there so that we get a certain quality of development proposal. And so what we're doing here is, one, if you want least amount of development possible, we've got a good, strong, solid base of standards that if you fit that pocket, you're fine. But if you want to deviate, you want to do things and have that flexibility, you come through the administrative process or the planning commission or yourselves through the development plan process, which gives you that flexibility. What you don't want, and I'll say this, you do not want necessarily staff to have 100% discretion. That's why this layering system is really important. Whether 10% is enough for staff, 20% is enough for planning commission, we'll see what we get. I was not comfortable going much further because I want to look and see where we are with some of these deviations and things that are being requested. And the reality of it is we may have to refine the percentages to certain things. Like I said, with a setback, when it only means a half a foot or 1 foot, that doesn't sound like much. But in a parking requirement where it may be 10% of 100 spaces, now we're talking about 10 spaces, or we're talking 20 spaces and things. And we have to understand, is that functioning, working, or not working? So there may be a way where we start breaking this out and saying on certain things it's 20% because that gives us a little better flexibility on setbacks, but maybe it stays at 10% for certain design criteria. We're not there yet. I have to watch some of these come through and do that. But for you, your question in particular, that development plan, you have that discretion built in through the deviation request and approval process. And then for us, there's not a lot of different planning. There's single family homes, things like that, all require plot plans and reviews and administrative. So we're generally looking at it as at least an administrative approval process. If they're asking for more than we can grant, then we will funnel them to the appropriate process after that.
At some point in the future, we're going to have a discussion about whether or not our existing land, our development code and our design standards are weighted too heavily towards single family, given the fact that there's so much, in the marketplace now is moving towards higher density. So we'll shelve that for now, but I think that's something we'll probably have to discuss as a body from the standpoint of policy, because that's really more of a policy decision.
Yeah, and we'll probably be talking to that workshop sessions with the planning commission even prior to that. So.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much, Dave. Appreciate it. Any other questions that those discussions might have opened up? All right. I believe there's an ordinance on this. 2695 is the number I have. Is that correct, City Clerk?
Yes.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion on adopting ordinance 2695.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Gregorczyk, second Deaton, that we adopt ordinance number 2695, an ordinance amending the Land Development Code for the City of Gardner, Kansas by amending sections of the Title 17 section of the Gardner Municipal Code. City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Deaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Winters?
Yes.
Councilmember Gregorczyk?
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yes.
Councilmember Baldwin?
Yes.
Ordinance 2695 passes, and we are done with regular business. Wow, that's quick. There's no old business, no new business. We're going to move on to council updates. Does anybody on staff have anything for council? I will start with our Deputy City Administrator.
Yes, we have started work on an update to the Parks Master Plan. As the ex officio for the PRAC, Council President Winters will be participating in the task force meetings along with various members of staff and community stakeholders identified by Parks and Rec staff. Invitations to stakeholders will be going out this week. Then we will be getting task force meetings started soon and a community survey sent out in the near future. The Parks Master Plan has to go through PRAC, the Planning Commission, and to Council, which we hope to do by late summer or early fall.
That's great. Thank you very much. Finance Director Matt Wolf.
Nothing tonight.
All right. There was a notification that went out regarding the just a clarification on the rates and the amounts of money we're talking about with regard to gas and electric. And would you be able to yes.
So during the last council meeting, there was a consensus that we put together a subcommittee to look at that. Our first meeting is tomorrow.
Okay.
It took us a week or so to put together all the information that had been requested by members of the subcommittee. Mark Baldwin is the ex officio on there, so we are getting started on that tomorrow.
Great. I know that we had some additional costs that have come in.
Yeah, and they came back a couple days ago and said that they were going to, their intent was to spread that additional cost over several years. And that was just the one, is it Grand River?
GRDA. Yeah, okay. All right, so Grand River is going to work with us on that.
Well, with the consortium,
All
the
right.
power consortium. So.
That's great, that's great, that's good to hear. All right, anything else? Okay. City Clerk,
Nothing for me.
we're going to start interviews for the Planning Commission candidates,
Yes, I'm
correct?
waiting to hear back from the interview team on their availability.
Okay, all right. Chief?
Nothing tonight.
Nothing for you, okay. I'm gonna go to the Zoom window and go to Jason Bruce, Parks and Rec. What do you got for us?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just want to let everyone know that, believe it or not, in a couple weeks we start our youth soccer games and also our first baseball tournament of the season. So it's that time of year.
That's great, that's great. I had more questions about the pool. Have we gotten any more guidance at all from the working group?
The county did send out some information last week to the Metro County agencies, and fortunately I'm on vacation this week, and when I get back in town next week, we're going to start looking at what other agencies are going to do moving forward.
Okay, hope you're having a great vacation.
Trying to figure out where you are.
Yeah.
I apologize for the background. It's our unfinished basement that we're working on, so it's a mess.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Gons Garcia.
Nothing tonight.
Okay, anything else for us, Dave?
Planning Commission next Monday evening, so we do have a meeting. We have a couple items there having to do with the Aspen Creek area. Other than that, nothing.
Okay, the not Parks and Rec. I've already talked to you, Jason. Public Works, Kellen Headley.
Nothing tonight.
You getting settled in?
Yes, I am.
All right, that's awesome. All right, we're going to move on to council. Yes, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. First of all, city attorney. Do we have anything pending on your end?
Nothing for city attorney, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Spencer Lau. I work with Ryan. He couldn't make it tonight, so nice to see you all.
Well, thank you very much, Spencer, for coming in. And then city administrator.
Thank you.
Yes.
During the appointment process for Casey's position, there was some question about the terms and the ambiguous language in the charter and the rules of procedure. So before Sharon starts working with Ryan on clarifying that language, I wanted to make sure that our direction was clear, that we are going to continue to follow the precedent that it's the remainder of the term of the individual vacating the seat that there's consensus on before we start the work on doing that, or any other additional changes that may be.
I think we should probably re-poll the governing body and see what the consensus is.
Well, I'll start. I think it should be the next election, not to continue for the seat, just the next election. So like in Casey's case, it would be this November, not 2 November or 3 Novembers. That would be my vote. Because that would get somebody in quicker that actually was voted in. I was appointed, and it did seem like when I was appointed, people seemed to, they didn't treat me like not a second, they didn't treat me the same as when you're elected. So I think it's better representation to do it next election. That'd be my opinion.
Okay. Casey, I don't know how well you can speak on this since you were appointed, but let's, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that, but just kidding.
That's story. You agree you did.
No, I mean, I've been both.
I was.
But I've been both. Randy's been both. Todd's been both. They can all speak to it probably differently than I can.
Sure.
That was just my opinion.
No, appreciate it. Thank you. Casey.
As the appointed person, I understand where you're coming from. I think what if, 2 people are appointed up here and then you've got a continuity issue? So I would go for the term, but that's just my.
Okay. Randy.
Yeah, I mean, I've already spoke to this point, and I think Jim and I spoke to it as in addition to that. So I'll stay where I'm at. I'm with with Tori. I think it does need to be at the behest of the citizens through an election process.
Okay. Council Vice President, what's your thoughts?
I always think if you can have the citizens make the decision, that's the best. In this case, the problem you run into is, multiple appointments, continuity, stacking up different terms. You know, you could essentially change the entire dynamic up here in that one election now, instead of having your 3 and 2 that are staggered for a reason. So I think to keep that staggering is best to keep the body working forward instead of large transitions.
Okay. Council President?
Yeah, I think, I think the staggering is important. I wonder if is there anything in the middle of that?
Are you talking about like a special election? So,
Well,
for example, if you had somebody who was appointed to the remaining 3 years of a term, and there's an election coming up, they can have a special election, but would only be for 2 years. So that replacement would only serve for 2 years in that special election. Something like that.
Yeah, something along those, some kind of a combination.
But since we're all at large, who gets the 2-year term, who gets?
Oh, no, the person who's in the special election. So anybody who's got less than 2 years left in a term would stay until the next election, which is a regular election. Anything more than 2 years would stay until a special election.
To keep the staggering
And
would
then-
be two of, let's say it's the 3 time.
Yep.
2 of them would get a 4-year term, and 1 of them would only get a 2-year term, so.
In the special election, because the special election would only be.
Yeah, only based on appointment, though. That's the trigger.
Well, yes, that would be it, and it would only be for that position, but that actual term still stays with that position. So let's say, just for example, not that it's going to happen, because anything that happens now is not going to take effect until another appointment comes. But, Casey got appointed in February of this year. Now, the election's in November. There would be a special election for Casey, plus there would be an election for mayor and 2 other council members. So that'd be 3 members of the council plus the mayor in a special election. All right, that third council member is a special election. But whoever wins that seat, Casey's seat, whether it's Casey or somebody else, would only serve for 2 years until the next regular election for that seat.
Yeah, Jim, if we could take a look at precedents.
So would you have to file, like let's say the school board files for different seats, you'd have to actually file for
No.
that seat?
No, there would be a separate special election just for that seat.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure there's precedents. We can't
So-
be the only
So
community
if
that
5
has this
people were
problem.
running for council, they'd be running for those 2 seats, and then other people would have to file for the special election.
Exactly.
And run for that 2-year term.
That's exactly
Okay.
how it would work.
Okay.
Yeah, that way
Which
you
makes it a little
keep
bit
the
more
staggering.
complex.
Yeah.
But that would be the only way to be able to keep the staggering as it currently sits.
Would we try to have the special election when there's an actual election, so we're not, because we have to pay?
No, it would be the same time. It
Okay,
would be the
because
same
if it
time.
was a special election off, like
Oh, no.
not November
No.
or whatever, we'd have to pay for that.
That's the only way I could see that would be fair and would they be able to foster continuity. Otherwise, it's a free-for-all.
I would like something like that.
As I was saying, I think there's precedents out there. We can't be the only community that's come to this conclusion.
There's not very many special elections out there.
Not the special elections, just the organization of it.
No? I mean, we can have them. We can have the city staff research those options and bring something back.
Yeah, I think I'd
But-
get Ryan involved. And do
Yeah,
some
and then let us
research.
have
Yeah.
a discussion and a consensus on those actions. But I think that we want this to be as open and transparent as possible and make sure
Always.
that So
Because that might then keep the continuity of people on here, and it would also keep the staggered terms.
well, the staggered terms can't be negotiated because
Right.
that's part of our
Right.
charter ordinance. We can't really get away from that unless you want to change the charter ordinance. And in this case, we probably would be changing the charter ordinance anyway if we decide to.
We were gonna
Special
keep
elections.
those.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, let's just take a look at it in a methodical way based on precedents and rediscuss it.
And look at other communities for some guidance. Wouldn't hurt. So, but be clear, this is only for future appointments,
Right.
not the existing one.
No worries.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
We've been re-engaged by the air show, and they are planning on having the air show on July 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Obviously, the 4th kind of overlaps with our event, so we have secured the parking we need and everything. So we'll be supplementing, particularly in the law enforcement area, what they're doing at the air show, but we will still be fully staffed for our own event.
That's going to be an interesting weekend.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, Jim, so good to hear.
We could have up to 100,000 people descending on Gardner.
It's a
over
great
that,
economic
3 days.
driver
That's
for
awesome.
us.
I think that's awesome.
Yep.
Hopefully they buy fireworks.
And whoever works,
Exactly.
who on this place works at New Century? Oh, I know who does. Corey does. You know, your location is going to be prime viewing.
Well,
I'm just
it's going to
saying.
be interesting because in Kansas City, you're in a bowl. And
Yeah.
It's easy to block off. There's going to be people are going to park wherever they can get a parking spot. That's going to be the challenge.
Yeah, traffic control is going to be very dicey, and I'm hoping that that the organizers are bringing in as many uniformed and plainclothes police officers and others that can work on that.
We're working on signage and everything.
Yeah.
To see, because we need to make sure that our Gardner residents know how the traffic's going to be impacted, and so hopefully it'll be a minimal interruption. So.
And oh, by the way, we're right in smack in the middle of the Main Street reconstruction during that
Well,
time.
actually,
too.
no. We would the letting for 56 isn't going out until July, so it won't have started.
Oh, that changed because it was originally going to start at the end of May, early June.
Well, and from an economic impact, and my dad is a little old, I used to support as a civilian Command Navy Recruiting Command, and they handled the Blue Angel Air Show circuit across the United States. And again, my dad is a little old, but I believe it was $700 per participant on economic development of that community. So we're talking beer, food, hotel, gas, and shot skis. So that could be a great, a larger boom for our community than fireworks could ever be. So
Yeah, a lot of it depends on where the parking.
Right.
They're parking at Garmin as a sponsor, so they're shuttling from Garmin, the Olathe District Activity Center to the east. They're also shuttling from there, and we'll have one location they're going to shuttle from inside Gardner.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I was going to bring it up, so I'm glad that you're on that board, and I know the air show coordinators on the civilian side, they're working closely with the surrounding communities, so good to hear.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right. Before we get into the council updates for staff, I had a couple of things to bring up, and I know that there's been council members who have asked to clarify certain things on correspondence that went to the county last week regarding appointments. The reason why that letter was put out was because when those appointments were made, and I understand that the county commissioners are free to make those appointments, it's at their pleasure, totally understand that. The issue that that myself and the council president and vice president had, and the reason why those three individuals were on that letter is very simple. Those individuals are the representatives of the council as the duly elected president and vice president, and we did not have the time to go out and have a special meeting of the council to get all of the input from all the members of the council. Therefore, if we were to have anybody else on that particular letter, it would have constituted a coma violation, which I was not interested in entertaining. But we were informed of that action that directly impacts a jurisdiction that is one of the larger taxing entities within our city, approximately 2 days before the final action took place at the Johnson County Board of County Commissioners meeting. And I had discussions with that particular commissioner and was assured that when decisions were going to be made on that board, that the mayors of those communities that were affected would be consulted on those particular appointments. That did not happen in our case. It happened in the case of Spring Hill, and it happened in the case of Edgerton. I spoke directly to Don Roberts about this, and he said that he had recommended Ron Conness as Edgerton's representative. Spring Hill declined to name somebody because of the fact that their mayor is not going to be running for re-election, and they did not feel comfortable in having a decision made when that individual was not going to be, that particular seat was going to be filled until after the contract was started, which is going to be at the end of the year and after the next election. So that's the reason why Spring Hill did not name somebody, but they were consulted. The city of Gardner, however, was not. And that was the basis of the letter. It has nothing to do with the who, it has to do with the what. And the what is that we were being told, dictated to by the county, as to who was going to be representing the city of Gardner within that fire board. And that was the reason why the letter was drafted. So if anybody wants to make hay and make some assumptions that this was about the individual who was appointed, it was not about the individual who was appointed. It was about the fact that we were never consulted in that appointment process, which is what was given to every other jurisdiction within this fire district. And so I wanted to make those clarifications very clear for everybody on this particular dais, and also the folks in the community that might have had questions about that. Now I will be open to answer any questions that might be coming from individuals on this body. So, shoot.
Well, as you know, I sent some questions ahead
Yes,
of
you did.
time. I'll just go through them and I'll let you, some of them you kind of answered. I wanted to know what the leadership team is, who is on the leadership team, when and where does the leadership team meet, what topics are discussed, are any actions taken, and what other teams are there, including the leadership team, that are not shared with the governing body and the citizens?
The leadership team's always been the mayor, the president, the vice president of the council, Tori. That's not been changed. That's not changed in many, many years. The reason why those individuals are considered leadership is because, yes, they are in the line of succession, which I think was pointed out by the paper, but also because of the fact that they speak for the governing body in many cases when we cannot have a quorum because of coma violations. That's the reason why it's there.
I had not heard of the leadership team before. Not saying there wasn't ever documented, but even when we elect the vice president and president, we don't say that these people then will make decisions or send letters on our behalf. It's basically for succession when people aren't here. We didn't say that this was a decision-making board.
It's not a decision-making board.
Or a communication board or whatever it is. So I just had some questions. I feel like I'm pretty well versed in what goes on. I've been doing this, I've been coming to meetings since 2009. It's the first I'd ever heard of it.
Mm-hmm. I've heard, I know it goes back to the previous city administrator. I heard it numerous times.
Well, not just the previous city administrator, but the city administrator before her.
So I just had some questions.
Yep.
I'm not saying it was wrong or right or whatever. It's just, I was kind of I was shocked a little bit. I hadn't heard of this. I hadn't heard of the lingo. There's other times when we have to make a decision that there are emails that'll say, so-and-so is going to be brought up to be appointed, and do you have any concerns? So there are email communications that are based, that we make decisions on. So it just seems, it didn't seem right to me.
Okay, well, if there's a consensus that in the future, when we put out emails to the county, that you want to be informed in every single one of those and come back with to the city.
I guess my question would be then, how many emails are there?
Well, we have, how many correspondences do we have with the
that are made with the
county
leadership team?
I think she's referencing just the.
Yeah.
This might be the first one that I'm aware of this
It has to be for me. I've only been on it for a
Yeah.
Well, because you indicated that this happens all the time, so I wanted.
No,
to
I send letters.
Well, yes,
from,
I understand
from
that
the,
you and
the county and the state
city
all the time.
administrator. Yes, I get that.
But not the whole team. And the reason
Okay.
why we had because what was told to us was that I would be consulted, and if I were consulted, I would be consulting the governing body.
Right.
I would not be just making in fact, that's exactly what happened in Edgerton. They got asked for a name, and they met in their chambers and they selected somebody.
I agree that the city should have been contacted. I'm not disputing that. I just was taken aback. I didn't know about
Sure.
this leadership team. It just seemed like, I don't know.
We felt we needed to have members of the actual council on that letter because
Okay.
it would have given the standing that we needed in order to be able to make our case. Now, regardless of that, the county commission decided they were going to move in a different direction, but that's, neither here nor there.
Gotcha. Okay. Those are just my questions.
Yep.
You don't necessarily. have to
But there are no
answer.
other teams. We don't run things in secrecy.
Well, I didn't think we did, but then it kind of seemed like we did.
Well,
So
we had to react to a situation where we were completely blindsided on this. We had no idea that anyone was going, that our existing, in fact, we were never told by either our county commissioner or the mayor or the county chair that our representative was going to be replaced. And that's what was throwing me, is that we already had a representative on the fire board and was told that we weren't told that it was going to be replaced. And so-
Dr. Cook has not been replaced.
No, he is not, because we fought that. They were going to replace Dr. Cook. I talked to our county commissioner directly, and I said, "Are you replacing Dr. Cook?" And she said, initially, yes. And I said, why? Because have you even contacted Dr. Cook about this appointment? And she goes, I hadn't. I said, well, you probably should have done that without, before replacing him. And at that point, that's when the other decisions were made. Right now, Spring Hill's position on the fire board is being taken up by either yourself or Dr. Cook. I don't know which one is which, but one of them is Spring Hill's representative.
You'll have to work that out with the commissioner, mayor. I
Oh, no,
don't know those
I've already
details.
had that discussion with both the commissioner and the county chair. And I don't mind having two Gardner representatives on the fire board, but I think that it's a little bit detrimental to Spring Hill. I mean, they deserve a representation. They're going to be part of the district at the end of the year.
Yeah, I don't have those details, sir.
So, all right. Any other questions? I want to make this as transparent as possible.
Yeah, Mayor, I have it. I have a comment, I guess, and I'm the one that was appointed, just for the record, if you hadn't read the newspaper. I just find it interesting, and I wrote this down because I had numerous comments that I wanted to make, and some of them were not very nice. I find it interesting that 3 individuals upset about the commissioner's appointment decided a self-label leadership team somehow required consultation. I, along with Tori and the rest of us up here, even Casey, she's been in the peanut gallery over the years with me. I've never heard this leadership team title. I'm the one that pointed out in the newspaper, when the newspaper asked for comment, I described that I felt like fairly easily and succinctly that VP and president are purely for secession. If you're unable to hold your duties, and or if you're on the road or on vacation or something, they would take over. And I applaud Mark for his appointment and did so just a day or two after that appointment. But I do find the term, and I'm the one that also made the comment that I don't think that term should be used moving forward, that the leadership team term in a municipality that's supporting the community through policy governance would be used. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
I'd be very happy to answer that.
Well, along those lines, I wanted to say, the letter was from the leadership team, but the letter wasn't we weren't asking to be consulted personally. We were asking for the entire governing body to be consulted.
Correct.
The letter came from the leadership team because we couldn't put everyone else on it because of COVID.
Well, I still don't think the term leadership team should be used.
All right, we won't use it then.
Can I make a comment? Because you did mention my name. I have heard of the leadership team before, even sitting out there. So, just my sense.
Well, as an elected member, what I'm saying is I don't think the term leadership team should be used.
Fine, we won't use it then. But here's the thing, and this is where I'm going to, and I know there's in the interest of the spirit of unity, I'm not going to be making some of the comments that I would have liked to have made before, but I'm not going to do that. But I will state for the record, though, that although you were asked for an interview for comment on this, and although the author of the story said that, or the individual who was in the story was maintain that I was asked to or invited to provide comment. Let the record show that I never received a letter. I never received an email. I never received any correspondence whatsoever from that individual for comment. But they maintained that I was asked for comment in the paper. So I am very upset about that they would misrepresent my stance on this in such a blatant way. Next time, when they say that they have actually reached out to me for comment, they better have done it, because I'm going to call them out on it, and I'm going to do that right now. But anyway, the fact that we are having this discussion is really more around the fact that we were blindsided by it because we found out 2 days before the actual final action on the meeting. That should never have happened. We should have been contacted by the county commissioner or by the individual who was seeking appointment, at least to let us know, okay, I want to be representing the city of Gardner on this particular board. And that never happened. It's called courtesy. Why that individual felt that they had to go behind the back of the governing body in order to be able to get to that particular position is very distressing. And I will call that out. Yes, Mark.
So, I'm new to this leadership team.
Can't use that term anymore, Mark.
I don't care what you call it.
Yeah.
I didn't create it. It's been around for as long as I can remember, because I remember people challenging Chris and the city administrator for going out and using tax dollars to pay for the lunch. I don't know how many times we can count that Rich was talking about you having to pay for queso because you were late to the leadership lunch. Whatever. I don't care about what you call it, and if anybody knows it or what we call it going forward, it doesn't matter. What I will say is that, and some of this has been brought up, but there was a huge dropping of the ball by the county commission.
Absolutely.
Because, and I'm going to go above and beyond what Steve said. This is more fundamental. So, at the fire board, at a face value, seems very similar to a water district, which is elected, not appointed. And the fire board's decisions have a taxing effect. They can recommend a new station, for instance, and then county commission approves it, and we have a mill increase. So, again, probably should be an elected position. They should have codified, when they changed the board size from 3 to 5, which is what they were doing here, that a representative from each of the cities under FD1, Gardner, Spring Hill, and Edgerton, so there's your 3, one from an unincorporated area, and one as at large should be the makeup, so that you have equal representation. The fact that the requirement for the position can be met by a toddler is amazing to me. According to the county commission meeting, the only requirement is that you've lived here for 3 years. No age, no experience, no criminal history, nothing for criteria, and our commissioner refused to cite any criteria that she used for her determination of who the person should be. Another avenue for the commissioners to improve. So, while we're all FD1 residents, I think we should all, not this body, but all residents, should push the county to make changes to improve this board. I think it should be elected. And yes, Steve already brought this up, but since it's an appointed board, Commissioner Allen Brand can select whoever she wants. But the fact that another commissioner, which means it has to be from a different district, voted no on the appointment on what seemed to be a lack of resume, and I don't think that she meant on the person, but of the transparency of it, tells you that the other county commissioners were basically rubber stamping it for whoever she put in there. That's a county commission issue, but so be it. So I would be very interested in what criteria she used so that it can be out there for the future. Why she spoke to Spring, and she is Commissioner Allen Brown, spoke to Spring Hill and Edgerton mayors but not Gardner's is an interesting question. Was it because it was an appointment that ultimately she could do, so Councilman Gorsuch lobbied for it, and she didn't feel she needed to reach out to the city. I mean, if so, that's a crappy first interaction, or lack thereof, right? She was supposed to be here a couple meetings ago, but canceled on us. That would have been a good time to mention the fire board appointment. Where was the announcement from her to all of District 6 explaining the fire board was being expanded? Spots were open, and you know, even Commissioner Eilert stated it'd be nice to have one from each city. Where was that information before the meeting? She doesn't have any obligation to solicit potential appointees, and if it's an open position, she could have left it sit there. But a position she's trying to fill, and the city of Gardner wasn't solicited, and by the city of Gardner, I don't mean this board, this body, I mean the residents. That's not being represented, you know, that's poor taste. So now that I've hit the county commission, let's talk about Councilman Gorsuch here.
Keep it brief, please.
I'm trying.
All right. No, I mean,
You didn't mention it up here on the dais. You didn't mention it on your Facebook page. And I don't know your motives here, and I'm not trying to judge them. What I'm trying to say is that it just has the appearances of maneuvering behind all the residents' backs. You know, it's not an election, so Commissioner Allenbrand, you know, asked for her recommendation. So it would have been nice then if, you know, Steve came to all of us and asked for our recommendation, at which point I would have recommended that we don't even pick from this group and we open it up to the city, like we do other appointments. Not notifying the body is one thing, but for the entire city to not be told, notified, consulted, or have the opportunity is shameful. You know, it's essentially taxation without representation. We learned this less than 200 years ago, right? So the only thing I will say at the end of that is I believe our new appointee owes an explanation to the residents as to why you'll be a good representative, since that was denied earlier. And since you are up here on the dais, I expect that you can be our liaison from the governing body of Gardner and the fire board, and then you can provide regular updates on fire board business. That is all I have.
Yeah, Mark, I appreciate your questions, and specific to the commissioner, I think you have a lot of valid questions, and I would encourage you to get those questions emailed to her, perhaps. Jim can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe she's already on the schedule to come in and visit with City Council, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, we rescheduled it, I believe, the first meeting in April.
April 5th? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
first
the
meeting.
prior meeting, I believe she canceled based on the weather, again, if I'm not mistaken. But Councilman Baldwin, I would highly encourage you to get those questions in an email format and get them to her. As for me, I'm going to have to go back a little bit on the story just to put it in perspective. The fire district levied their mills to build a new firehouse down in Edgerton. I don't necessarily disagree with the firehouse based on service area, etc. But you hit the nail on the head. We had taxation without representation. And so I started socializing that exact thing. I actually talked to Jim about it. I believe the mayor walked in during a conversation.
Yes, we did.
And we talked about that. On a parallel line, Mark, I can assure you that I did not know at that time that the commissioner had any intent to changing the fire board. I then got called to Chief Kirk's office, probably 4 or 5 days after I socialized it, and we visited for about an hour. Again, Chief, I'm not upset about the firehouse, I'm upset about the lack of representation. I didn't even know who Dr. Cook was, and I actually office right across the street from him. So then a phone call came out, I can't remember which way it was, and I talked to the chairman. The Chairman Eilert then put me in touch with the commissioner. The commissioner and I had similar ideas about representation or a lack of. Then several days went by, if I'm not mistaken, and I was asked as a citizen if I would want to be on the fire board. And I said, well, I would need to apply for it. Let's do it, do it the right way. And I applied for it, not knowing who the commissioner was also speaking with. I should say I'm not arrogant enough to think that I was the only one she was speaking with. Similar to how I see the letter that was posted in the Gardner newspaper, but I digress. I do look forward to providing that representation to all of the city. I do look forward to understanding the dollars and cents on behalf of the fire board levied through the mill. I do look forward to being able to provide, and again, I have to be careful or cognizant of what's spoken in public and what's spoken in executive session for the fire board. But I do look forward to sharing that information in a very legitimate and deliberate way. I'd probably send it to Jim and copy the mayor, and then they could socialize it amongst those that are elected. I'm sorry you feel that way, Mark, but by no means is this a maneuver, I think is the word that you used. I understand that perception is reality, and that's the way you perceive it, and that's fair, but by no means is this that. Again, I go back to the leadership team comment, and I know we've spoken about it, Mayor. I'm not going to belabor it, but I found that to be appalling, maybe just as much as you found or perceived this as a maneuver. But nonetheless, I appreciate your comments, Mark, and I do remind you to engage the commissioner and get those notes down, and she's forthcoming.
As you've said before, it's not the who, it's the what. And I don't think this has anything to do with you, per se, right? The person, right? You might very well have been the person that was appointed anyway from open it up to the people, and you don't have to tell anybody that you are throwing your hat in the ring. I respect that. But I don't think it's good leadership from an elected official of the city to not share that another taxing authority, another elected body is doing something that affects the citizens, and you don't tell them. That's my crux there. So I appreciate your comments. That's it.
Yeah, and I will respond to that whole that swipe at the letter. It was public record. The application that was filed for that open position was never open to the public.
Again, Mayor, you'll need to take that up with the commission.
I understand that,
Yes,
but our letter was absolutely open record. So we'll take the criticism, because I'm sure that there are individuals who'd love to criticize on that, but people knew about that. We had no knowledge whatsoever about the appointment process.
I appreciate you bringing up the fact, and the key word is open to the public or public letter.
Yes, sir.
Why did I find out, or I don't know where Councilwoman Deaton stands, nor do I know where Councilwoman Roberts stands, but I didn't know about the letter until I watched the Board of County Commissioners, and admittedly I was in San Diego, so I was a couple of hours off.
You know why? Because
but I didn't know about it then. So how is it public?
It was read publicly to the board. Here's the thing. We
it
drafted that letter the day before the meeting.
Okay, you don't have to get hasty here, sir.
No, we drafted that letter the day before the meeting.
All I'm saying, it wasn't circulated amongst the dais, which does stand for the leadership team, if it was indeed public. Because the commissioner that didn't vote for me, for which I won 6-1,
yes,
she said that she received a letter
that morning,
but there was no public to it at that point in time. It was more of a comment. I received a letter, and I'm paraphrasing, sir. I received a letter from the mayor of Gardner, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. At that point in time, I didn't know a letter existed, if indeed it was public, prior to the submission to the county.
the second it got submitted to the county, it was public record,
Okay.
Randy.
If you knew it existed, it would become public.
So, in the future, if there are letters like this, could, after you send it, the leadership team sends it, could you share it with us? How would that work?
We could send it through the city
Because
clerk.
I didn't know until I saw it in the paper on Thursday.
We could send it through the city clerk. And they could say,
But-
this is what's been sent, and, you know, if
Even
you
for
have
the
any
citizens,
feedback.
not just us, the citizens might want to see it.
Can we do that? I don't think it's a problem, right?
Yeah, we can.
I've not, no issue with that at all.
Yeah, if we get that, that's fine. I mean, that's the direction of the
Absolutely.
council, absolutely.
Absolutely. We ran out of time, really what it came down to on this. We literally got that, when was the signatures done on that? Literally the afternoon before the meeting.
I signed it at 5 o'clock
Yeah.
Wednesday.
And when you say in the future, when it happens, I mean,
It's like the first time that it's
yeah,
happened.
Okay.
this is very.
Well, then this is good, we're talking it through, so then there isn't a confusion next time, and we all kind of know
Yeah.
where we stand and what
No,
needs
no,
to go.
no
what's
nefarious aspects of this at all.
Right.
None. We were blindsided. We found out about it literally less than 48 hours before the meeting. And at the time, we were under the impression that our representative was being replaced. We got clarification on that from the chairman a little bit later, but that's for another day. Any other questions? All right, I'll move on to other issues that the body might have. I'll start with Councilwoman Deaton.
I saw in the Friday minutes that we were looking at bids for Big Trash Day, and I'm excited to see that. I know I've seen it a lot on Facebook. People are kind of expecting it to happen, and if we do vote for it, great. If we vote against it, great. I just want to make sure we get that communication to the citizens that it hasn't been approved or decided yet. So don't be planning for Big Trash Day quite yet, but I've seen a lot of comments on it, so I appreciate you getting those numbers and look forward to seeing that on an agenda in the future.
Yes. Okay. Anybody else? Anything else?
Nope, that's it, sorry.
Councilwoman Roberts?
I have nothing, I think I already shared.
All right, thank you. Councilwoman Dvorak?
Yes, sir. On a different note, and before I go on to the new note, I do want to say thank you for everybody's input. I appreciate the professionalism. My intentions were never to jade the process on behalf of the county commission, but I'll let you guys take that up with the source. And I can email this to Sharon, but Lori McClintock emailed me, and I believe I responded and copied the mayor and the city administrator. I won't read the entire email, but she's lived in Gardner for over 30 years and basically, in a nutshell, supports the Gardner News and the use of tax dollars to support the Gardner News. And again, I'll forward that back out as a reference for the meeting, but I assured her that I would bring that up tonight, and without going word for word, it's fairly lengthy and detailed. I'll get that to Sharon and copy the bodies that need to be. Outside of that, I'm excited, and Jason, happy vacation. I'm excited to hear that we're potentially still on the path to opening the pool. I think, to Casey's point, the pool and the garbage are, I think, one and the same. They're very important to our community.
Well, we're not going to fill the pool with garbage, okay? Just for
no, sir. Thank you for the clarification. Obviously, tongue in cheek. But my point is, I'm glad that we're on that path, and I hope we stay on that path. That's all I had, sir.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it. Council Vice President?
I don't have anything.
All right, Council President?
Nothing for me, thank you.
All right. I have said my piece, and I think that we're good to move on. Understand we might disagree from the dais from time to time, but we are here tirelessly serving the people of our community, and it's good to have these kind of discussions out in the open. We go past that, we get past that, and then we move on, and we continue to work to make Gardner a better place for everyone. I think that would be agreed upon by everybody at the dais. So,
Yes.
having said that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion, Gregorczyk, second, Winters, that we adjourn. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed, any abstentions? We are adjourned.